Hello, my lovelies, and welcome back. It's been a while, and I do have another fabulous guest. This time it's a girl. I'm really thinking hard. I don't think I ever had a girl on this channel, so yay, Lexi. Welcome. Lexi will introduce herself in a second, but I have to say first, this is literally, I mean, there are a lot of amazing names in our fandom, but Girl Next Gondor is the best thing ever. So, Alexi, tell us about yourself. I'll obviously link all your details below here so people can find you. And yeah, tell us about yourself and your channel.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'm glad you like the name. We were kind of proud of it when we came up with it. A couple people have liked it, so that's good. Yeah, so I mean, I'm a pretty much a lifelong Tolkien fan. My first introduction was when this is kind of an interesting story. My fifth grade teacher would read chapters aloud of different books at lunchtime, and she had moved on to reading The Hobbit. She had gotten about 4 or 5 chapters in, and I was really into it. I really liked this book. You know, I liked books generally, but I really liked this one. And she stopped reading it suddenly. She said, well, you know, we had to, gave some excuse. And I was frustrated. So on the next library day, I went and I checked it out. And my mom took it away from me and she said, no, it's too dark, it's too scary, you're not ready for it. And so I was very upset. I was quite indignant because my mother was usually very encouraging of me reading all kinds of stuff. I was like, it's not scary, Mom. It's The Hobbit, right? And so I was about maybe 10 at this point.
Okay.
So I was old enough for The Hobbit, for sure.
Yeah.
So I was vexed, and it turns out that 2 months later I got the boxed set of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings for Christmas. And my mother had actually talked to my teacher and said, stop reading that book. I want to give it to her as a present. You can't spoil her. And so then I had, of course, tried to work my way around that, and I had to have like the hammer put down on me. And so then it all makes sense. And it all came together. And so I powered through The Hobbit, stumbled a little bit on Fellowship of the Ring, but finally got through the Council of Elrond. And from there on, it was just go. It was, straight on to the Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales. Finally completed my collection of Histories of Middle-earth just this year. So I've been in it for a while, and then about, what is it now, 5-6 months ago, I'd been kind of playing with the idea of doing a Tolkien YouTube channel, because I thought that, with the Hobbit movies having come out and then the new Prime series being announced, and there was a lot of, sort of a resurgence of interest in it.
Yes, there is.
Yeah. So
and especially people who want to find out, the lore behind the known lore, because, we're going second age now. So you can't find second age stuff, or not that much, in the 3 books and the 3 movies. So obviously, you need to dig a bit deeper, and that's what we are here for.
Right. I thought it was an opportunity to, sort of share all the trivia that people had maybe been less interested in before. So yeah, I made my first video, and it was a rough process, but I think the subsequent videos have maybe hopefully improved in quality, and we're rolling right along, and here I am today.
Yeah, and I love your channel. I would never invite anyone where I'm not, where I wouldn't watch the content or whatever the people are doing myself. So no, definitely people go check out Lexi. It's very similar to my channel, I would say. Not the live stream thingies, the recording thingies, but the lore videos. I think the style is a bit similar. Good. And we got to support our girls in this community. We just have been talking about this. So what are we talking about today? Today we are talking about, and we're starting, hopefully, if Lexi wants to continue this with me, we want to do this as a kind of series, and we want to talk about the 3 elven clans, and then, maybe possible other bloodlines. But yes, today we start with the first house of the elves that did awake first, the Vanya Elves. And we want to, talk about some main protagonists. There are not that many, sadly. And the Vanya Elves, we must say, are, well, elves we know the least of. But I recently made a video, and I'll link that down here, about them. And I did a lot of research, and I was like, actually, we do know stuff about them, and you can come up with the coolest theories. And yeah, so I decided to give this a try, to have this, because the law videos are 20, 18 minutes, whatever. And in these kind of forms of videos, you can have a real discussion and exchange views. And I really like that. And I want to, I'm here for my elves. So yeah, I asked Lexi and she agreed. So we will hopefully finish these elven clans. But yes, the Vania Elves. Lexi, overall, are you, I think you are also into elves. Who's not? What are you doing with your life, people, if you're not? But yeah, do you find them as fascinating as I do now? You also did a bit of digging deeper into your knowledge you already had on them. Or were you like, yeah, I don't know.
The Vanyar specifically, or just elves generally?
The Vanya.
Yeah, the Vanyar. They're very intriguing, I think, because, as you say, they're pretty mysterious, and they are the smallest, at least according to one of the legends of the awakening of the elves, which is kind of a misty subject veiled in the depths of time. Even from an universe perspective, the elves have differing legends about their origins. So they were originally, I think, in one version, there's just 14 of them.
14, yes. This is the canon. So 144 elves did awake, and 14 of them just were Vanya, although they had the first pick, which is weird. And we're going to talk about that in a bit.
Yeah, so they were, so there's really not that many of them, at least to begin with. But I think the influence that they have is maybe disproportionate. And as you said, they're the first to awaken, and their king is accounted the high king of all elves everywhere. So kind of this odd mix of, we don't know anything about them, they don't really do that much or appear very often in the actual stories of Middle-earth, because really they're not in Middle-earth for very long. But they do have this sort of unseen influence, I would say. So I am, at first I was like, oh, Vanyar, okay, obviously not as fun as Noldor, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, yeah, no, this could be worth exploring, because they definitely have an impact that's disproportionate to their actual number of characters.
Yeah. And I do think there's a reason he tells us, and he wants to keep them mysterious, and we will talk about that in a bit. But I think there's a reason for that. So we have 3 houses for everybody that didn't know this. We have 3 houses. So the OG, the first house, are the Vanya Elves. The second house are as Lexi said, the Noldor Elves. For me, the most interesting ones, and we have the most written account of these elves. And so I think Tolkien himself thought them the most interesting. It's literally reading a Greek tragedy, reading about the Noldor. And then we have the Telari elves, who literally are scattered all over the places. And yeah, so Vanya first, my thoughts on them is all of them are born in Middle-earth, right? They are born in Crivennen, around a lake, and their awakening story, you were talking about this, is actually really fascinating. And I think it's a myth. I don't think it is what really happened. Lexi, can you mute yourself partly, because I think I hear myself? Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I do think it's a myth. And I do think, because all of us, we had to invent something, so if you're Christian, you might believe in these things. If you have another religion, or if you're not religious, but you have some story in mind how we came into being. And I do think this is what the elves did. And I don't think it is what actually happened. And I do think you need something to teach your children. You need a heritage. And I do think especially these numbers, and then that pair awoke, and then that pair awoke. I think some of it might be true, but I think some myth they are keep going, because the whole number thing is really weird. Maybe this is how they taught their children to count or whatever. But yeah, what do you think, Lexi? Do you think the awakening of the elves is that first of all important? Did that really happen that way? Like 14 elves, then I think 56 Teleri, and 74 54 Noldor and 74 Telleri. It's weird, this whole number thing, and I think this is the made up part, because all the kings as well and queens, the first to awake, never appeared in the story ever again, and that is for me the giving away factor, because then they are replaced by the Vanya king, Ingwe, the Noldor king, and the Teleri king. And where are the other ones, the OGs that awoke? Because that's just a few years later after the awakening, they move west, they start their journey west. So where did these people go? So I really do think it's a myth. What do you think?
I'm kind of in two minds about it. Because like you said, the number thing, the fact that they're all paired, it has that sort of mythic sense.
Biblical, yeah.
Exactly. It seems like the kind of thing where if you were looking back on something, you would be making up a story that had a
Mhm.
lot of symmetry in it and numerical symbolism and all of that. But on the other hand, we have to remember that at least as far as we know in Middle Earth, we do have physical gods running around,
Yeah,
or roughly the counterparts thereof. And we
yeah,
have, like you said, and this is kind of where it gets interesting. We have Ingwe and Finwë and Olwe, Elwë, Lenwë, all of the sort of leaders that
yeah,
emerge of the Telari. They're still alive. Yeah, elves are
yeah,
immortal. They don't die, even if some
yeah,
mischance happens to them. They end up hanging around in the halls of Mandos. So
yeah.
it seems odd that elves would develop a myth of that sort, that would be counter to what actual living elves would remember of, presumably their early days in Middle Earth.
Mhm.
And one thing, kind of a complicating factor I would throw in here is we know we've got Morgoth running around, we've got Sauron running around. When the elves awaken, they
Mm.
kind of have this weird thing where they immediately live in fear because they're just these,
Yes.
innocent, pure little beings waking up and seeing the stars, and they're like, "Oh, how wonderful!" And the Valar are searching for them, and Orome eventually finds them. But even by the
Mhm.
time he's found them, they've developed. People have been stolen away in the night.
Yeah.
There's like this awful thing where
It's
Morgoth
like
and
the
his
Grim
servants
Reaper
immediately
is,
start
yeah.
preying on them.
No, no, definitely. Yeah, I just wondered, where are the three OG, where's Enel, where's Tata, where are these original elves? And they're never about, like you said, they're immortal. I don't think Melkor killed all of them right from the get-go, and then they had to replace them with Ingwe and the others. So I found that a bit odd, but again, let's not. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. Yeah, awakening and backstory to the elves, because I do think the number thing is important, talking about the Vanya. So we said they awoke fast, and in the book, you clearly can see they came across more and more elves awakening. This is literally how I think I said that in my video even. So they literally played this game, I pick these, you pick these. But you got the feeling from the text that the Vanya had the first, they came across these people and pairs awakening, but he always hesitated. He was always like, nah, they don't really fit. I don't want to take them. And then the Telari took them mostly, or the Noldor, took them and made them theirs. So they were not as picky. And you can see that later actually in the Teleri. Why were the Teleri split up all over the journey and all over Middle Earth and scattered all over Middle Earth? Because they were not as a tight group, and they had so many subgroups and subgroups of subgroups. That didn't happen to the Vanyar. So I do think it, right from the get-go, Tolkien tells us they are special. They don't accept anybody amongst their rank. And this is why I think they are why Ingwe is the High King of the elves. This is a very special bloodline. They're not accepting anybody to their ranks, and then later on in time, and we're going to talk about this, they write themselves in a bit out of history. They kind of disappear, and they become angels. They're so close to the gods in the end, to the demigods. They even live basically in their halls, and they kind of became a different concept of elves than the Noldor, for example, who are the warriors and the fighters. And I found that fascinating reading the beginning, how they hesitated to pick people.
Yeah, I think maybe you can say that the Vanyar are a very, very specific subset of elves.
Yeah.
They knew exactly what they were looking for, and it wasn't traits that were just scattered throughout the elven population generally.
Yep.
I would say
Yep.
that like Telari is like your base elf. Like
Yes.
any sort of permutation of likes to sing and enjoys trees
Mm-hmm.
and or oceans would
Yeah.
fall comfortably in the Telerian category. Noldor a little bit more specific. You know, you kind of have to
Yes.
have that crafty bent,
Exactly.
little bit more aggressive maybe
Mm-hmm.
to qualify as a Noldo.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Vanyar may be the most, I guess, the most specific of all. They're
Yes.
really trying to, and it's interesting too because what is it that they do write themselves almost out of history. They become these very rarefied, mystical
Mm-hmm.
figures. And in a
Mm-hmm.
world where I think, you know, spiritual authority is considered maybe more important than temporal physical authority,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
seems to be a theme that crops up quite a bit.
And that alone lifts you higher, right? It puts you kind of on a pedestal, because all the stories we know about, even in the Silmarillion, everything is about war. These are stories about war, about tragedies, about families failing, about houses dying out, also about friendship and all that. But those are not stories the Vanya stand for. They don't stand for these stories. They like the other aspect, like you said, and they love poetry, they love these kind of things. This is not fitting in a world Tolkien describes and gives us. So they don't even fit to they are not made for this world Tolkien describes. So they are perfectly set up in Taniquetil.
Yeah, of course, to have a good story, you have to have like things going horribly wrong, and
Yeah.
if and so, I mean, the only stories we have are the stories we have where things went wrong in the Vineyard. Things don't really go wrong for
No.
them. Although
No.
I do find it very interesting, given that they are these sort of removed from history and so close to the Valar and so, you know, aligned with spiritual perfection.
Mhm.
Indus's role, Indus being
Yes.
one of the Vanyar,
Yeah.
seems very, very not Vanyarin, I guess.
No. No. And yeah, so before we come to the characters, let's maybe explain a teeny tiny little bit what happened. And this might also describe the well, describe what their status in the story is, and what it means. So the thing is, Orome came and, he offered, come and live with us. We love you so much. We want to get to know you. Come to the Undying Lands. And this is really important. So some stayed behind. So some of the 144 OG, I call them OG elves. I mean, I don't know, I live in the 21st century. So kill me. So the OG elves, 144, some stayed behind, but only Telari and only Noldor. So no Vanya we know of, the 14, I mean, not many, right from the beginning, stayed behind in Crewennan. What does that mean? They were not afraid, I think, and they were really, really eager and keen to reach the Undying Lands and be with the gods, and be with what be there and live this very different kind of life. I mean, they basically, like you said in the beginning, they never really lived in Middle Earth. They were born, they were there for a few years, then they traveled across Middle Earth, and they were the first ones to even reach the Undying Lands. They were so keen and eager. So in full numbers, they made this journey through a whole continent, following somebody, their king Ingwe, who has been in Valinor and in Aman, and told them, it's really nice there. Let's leave our birthland and let's live there. And they trusted him fully. So it also means they're not scared, because it's very the concept of, if you think somebody is very unworldly and is very well read and literally sits in his library all day and whatever, this is what I think of them in a bit. but they later partake in the wars, and they were said to be the best fighters. So you can see this fearless aspect of just following their king, no hardship, they are not afraid of that, and they travel amongst their battleland and then end up in a complete unknown world to them. But they were not as afraid, and the Telari were afraid, and they often stopped on the way. The Vanya were never, so they are also fearless in a way, and they have this curiosity and everything, which is a nice trait.
Right. We think of them as being mystical, and I think we bring a lot of sort of human baggage to that.
Yes.
But it maybe it's more helpful for us to think of them as being sort of more in touch with the primordial innocence of the elves. They're not darkened by fear. They're not, suspicious. They have this love of beauty that's all consuming, and they will, dare anything basically to seek that out and to, learn more, but not in a controlling or possessive kind of way that we see with some of the other clans. Certainly
not naming any.
No Vanyar are going to be tempted by Sauron or Morgoth, and that's I think that's where I'll leave it for this podcast. So yeah, I think it, that you underestimate them at your peril. It's a mistake to think of them as just being these sort of lazy, good for nothing academics afraid to get their hands dirty, and it's better to think of them as being, maybe so consumed with their sort of the joy of life, which is of course what elves are meant to be, is fully in the world and making it better and transforming it and turning it beautiful. They're the elvishest of elves, maybe.
I think they are the purest form. I would give them, I would give them that label. They are the purest form of elves. What they had in mind, especially the Valar had in mind, when they sung everything into being. And this is why I think they later on, they got on so well that, and we'll get to that, but the Vanya literally moved in with the gods, right? They came closer and closer, and at the end they lived just below Taniquetil, the holy mountain. They were often invited to the whole what's it called, Mahanaxar, the Ring of Doom, where the Valar spoke and made their decisions and everything, and they were the only elves invited there to also help with the judgment. So they rose so high, and I do think this happened because they are the purest form, and this is what the Valar had thought an elf should be like. And I think maybe they poured that, into the song, the creation song. I think God had a I think God really wanted these three Eru wanted these three different versions of elves, and he must have wanted that. Otherwise, the story wouldn't have gone this way. But yeah, I really like this, that they are the purest form, and this is why they got along so well and basically became angels and lived with the demigods.
Yes. Well, I agree that, they get along with the Valar because they obviously have some affinity to what the Valar were trying to accomplish during singing the world into being. There's also, but as you point out, the elves are the children of Eru. They were the ones that the Valar were waiting for, and weren't part of their original conceptions. None of the Valar participate in the creation of elves or men per se. Now, dwarves are a different story. Poor Ale, he's just trying, man. But so the Valar, or the Vanyar, pardon me, the Vanyar seem to be very attuned with what at least the Valar thought that the world should be, and I think that's why, like you said, they almost mingle their peoples. The Vanyar just sort of hang out in Valimar. Hanging out with Maiar, walking down the street, lighting candles, singing songs. It's a great time. And it's interesting because, they adapt so well to living in the Blessed Realm. Whereas Tolkien several times expressed, kind of went back and forth on the view of, maybe the Valar shouldn't have done that. Maybe that was overreaching because it kind of, arguably, it led to some disastrous developments. Now I think
Yeah.
the Valar themselves would say like, well, this is better than the alternative. You guys have no idea how bad it could have gotten. We acted in the nick of time, and if things went wrong later, well, they could have gone a lot wronger if
Yeah.
Morgoth just like kills all the elves without giving them a chance to,
Yeah.
grow and learn.
Yeah.
But it's an ambiguous moment, the
Yeah.
arrival of the elves in Valinor, and it works really well for the Vanyar. They seem to
It
take to
does.
it like ducks to water, but
Yeah.
there's definitely more of a cultural shock for the arriving Tachar and
Yes,
Neller.
exactly. Because the thing is, their concept is different. The ones are warriors and smith, and the other ones wanted to be close to the sea and the land, and that is very different. And a man, I always say, yes, it's blissfully, but it's rather blissfully boring. So I would I would literally hang myself being in a man, because no, I want adventure. I want, all these things to happen. And the Vanya fit perfectly, as you said. And for me, it's kind of a circle. So they were born on Earth. All of them were born on Earth. And the Vanya, right from the beginning, reached heaven, basically, Aman, and they arose very quickly to the top of heaven and mingled with the gods. And the other ones, it was maybe too early for them, because the Noldor and the Telari, they didn't even discover what does it mean to be on Earth. And this is why they kind of go back to their ancestral home for a long time and shape the world, because it would look very differently without them. And like you said, I don't think Eru really wanted them. Why were they born in Criven? And I think they had a story. Things should have happened there. You don't travel right from being born to heaven, right? You have a journey, and that journey never really happened. Yes, there was a journey to Aman, but the whole journey and a full life never happened for them. For the Teleri and for the Noldor. And I think that story had to be told, and this is why they went back, in a way, part of that.
Yeah, you raise good points. It's this. I mean, it circles kind of back to the fact that even before the world physically is created, even before time begins. So all of our ways of talking about the music of the Ainur and the period that happens before the creation, it's like we're in the wrong dimension to even be talking about it in some ways. But but according to our best understanding of what happened, there was discord. There were problems introduced from almost from the very beginning, well before the world is even created. And then, of course, when the Valar descend into Arda, into their little globed universe, or maybe not a globe, depending on what book you're following. They descend into the world to participate in it and be part of it and be bound by time, and Morgoth is with them, and he's just like, blowing up continents left and right. I don't know half of what he got up to, but I'm sure none of it was good. And so already, even before the world is created, we get a sense that Eru's, at least his initial conception, has gone off, has gone wrong. It's gotten derailed. So when I again, I don't want to speculate on Eru's motives or actions, because I think we do not have nearly enough information.
No.
Yeah, I think even the Valar would shrink from trying to predict exactly what's going on outside of time. But
and he didn't want them to
know.
He didn't tell them what they are really all about. Especially humans, right? They didn't have an idea, the Valar, and you can see that because they had no idea what to do with humans and humanity.
Yeah, you really kind of feel for Manwë here. He's, trying to keep everything alive and afloat, and he really doesn't even understand what he is and is not allowed to do. So we, like you said, the elves awake at Cuiviénen and presume they awake in Middle Earth, where things are still kind of crazy and kind of tumultuous, and we have some of them who seem like they're maybe more prone to wresting control back from nature in the form of the Noldor, or fighting to defend their people. And we have the Telari who wander, and they are just, their main trait, I guess, for all of them is, it takes different forms, but their main trait is that they're just so enamored of Arda specifically, not of Valinor. When they go to Valinor, a lot of them kind of want to go back.
Yeah, their hearts are literally torn. Their hearts are
Yeah.
torn, and this is why they live on an island in the middle of both worlds. Yeah, and I think, yeah, like you said, I think their hearts are bound to the land, especially of their birth. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I see your point that elves maybe should have had a different destiny. And it's
Hmm.
interesting to think how the Vanyar would play into that because, as you said, they seem like they were born for heaven. They were
Yeah.
born ready to go straight
Yeah.
to the Undying Lands, the Blessed Realm, and just
Yeah.
live there happily and safely.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I kind of wonder what their role would have been, I guess, if they hadn't gone to gone to
Yeah.
Aman. Would
Yeah.
they
It's.
just be the
I don't
protected
think they.
priest class or what?
I don't think they would have been super happy in Middle Earth. I don't. I really don't think so. Not with Melkor being there, literally destroying it for centuries, then the Valar having to rebuild it. I don't think they would have their nature. Wouldn't that their nature is not to fight for lands and to fight wars and all that. Yes, they do that if they have to, but I don't think it's in their nature. And yeah, yeah, it's well, I always thought this very, the Valar knew there would come something like an elf. They knew they knew there would be humans and there would be firstborn, Eru's firstborn, and Eru's secondborn. They knew of that. A lot more they didn't know. They didn't know when they would come, whatever. And so they were curious, and they were just themselves. A lot was happening. There was no real, flora and fauna. It was just the moon at a certain amount of time. There was not even the sun, and all that didn't happen. So they couldn't wait. And I think this is why Aule did it also, with the dwarves. They couldn't wait. They just wanted companionship and something to happen and somebody to talk to and all that. And this is why, they invited them. But I think it was actually wrong that they invited them. And yeah, well, we saw what, the flight of the Noldor, Doom of Mandos, all that, what happened, because they thought, especially, this book is named after the Silmarils, of these beautiful objects, and they were like, yeah, give them to us, we'll crack them open, and the light will come again. They didn't count on fear nor being, but then my heart will break. They didn't understand the full concept of somebody like Noldor and Telari and men, not at all. And yeah, I think the Vanya and them are the closest, because again, Vanya, pure form of elves, how the demigods wanted an elf to be.
Right. Gosh, every time we talk about this, I talk about this and think about it, I really get a sense for just how hard the Valar are struggling. They're actually some of my favorite characters. People sometimes give them a hard time because they, make what seem to us to be mistakes, but it's like, yeah, man, we all make mistakes. We call them the gods, but they're not really. They're, they don't know what's happening.
No.
They have extraordinary power and wisdom and understanding and foresight and yada yada yada, but yeah, they're just mucking along, and there's this great scene where Oroma is riding around trying to find him some elves. He's afraid that they're going to wake up and he's going to miss it or something. So he's
he's very eager to. Yeah.
He's like, I got to find these guys. Ali's going crazy. We got to get him some people to talk to.
Yeah.
And he finds them, and he comes hurtling back to Valinor, and he's just riding his horse through the streets, screaming, "I found him! I found him,
yeah.
guys! They're here!" And everyone's coming out of their quote dwellings. You have to imagine that it's Valar and Maiar, so some of them probably aren't even dressed in physical form. Coming out half clad and whatever they could just slap together real quick. Extra limb here, there. They're so excited and they can't wait, and
then they polish, they polish the towns, and are like, yeah, we're ready for you. Come here. And then the three kings came, and they were so impressed that they said, why not? Let's come here. Let's go to the promised land. Yeah, so that happened. They went there, they reached it fully, which shows you, they didn't really want to stay back at Earth. I don't really know. And then they moved. This is what I teased earlier. They first lived in oh god, what's that city called? Tirion upon Tuna, which is come on, these names. Okay, whatever. They lived in Tirion, and then they moved higher up, and they moved to the slopes of Taniquetil. And as I said, I think the Valar invited, we don't know, it's not said, but I think the Valar invited them to be closer to them. They didn't invite the Telari or any other. So the Noldor took over the city then and made that to their capital, basically. And they moved closer to the gods, lived with them. And like I said, they were invited to take part in the daily life of the Valar. Other elves, just imagine the elves back in Middle-earth, all the Telari that stayed there. They had no idea of what they were. Dark elves. They never saw that. They never saw the two trees. They never saw anything. And the Vanyar are literally the ones that knew it all, that have seen it all. And they are the light elves. And it's not just their description of that they're fair. Yes, they are fair elves. They were the blondies. But light also means enlightened, and I think Tolkien always loves these words. The trees enlighten the world, and Melkor always wanted to darken the world, and light also stands for this enlightenment, and it's portrayed in them being so close to the trees and to the gods, to the heavens, that basically it was foreshadowed in the beginning and in the naming where they'll end up. So location-wise. And then nothing really happens for a very, very, very long time. And we can come to the main characters now, maybe. And I think Indis is one of the most fascinating characters to talk about. And you teased her a little bit. So let's talk about Indis and what happened. And we can get to a really cool story, because I just wrote the Vanya video, the Noldor video. And there's this really cool case where the gods had to make a new law for elves to be allowed to remarry, and they all came to Mahanaxar and they discussed, and then a new law was made, so you can remarry if your spouse stays embodied, so you don't have two wives roaming around. I will explain that, because Indis has her role to play there. But let's talk about Indis. Tell the people, who is she and what happened?
Yes, let's talk about Indis. Poor Indis. Gets a lot of maybe undeserved hate because of Feanorian propaganda.
Yeah.
Everyone's on board with Nerdnell. No one cares about Indis. Or if they do care about her, it's to kind of be sniffy about her. So Indis is a woman of the Vanyar, and I'm kind of blurry on the distinctions between the different versions and dates of composition on this. So I'm just going to kind of blend of all of what I kind of have heard about her. So she's a kinswoman of Ingwe. We're not exactly sure. In some versions, it's suggested she might be his sister, niece, maybe.
Yeah.
Some close kin, though, to the High King of all the elves everywhere. Full stop. Woman of the Vanyar, and she kind of has a crush on the King of the Noldor. Now, of course, the King of the Noldor is married, not to her. And this is where it gets really interesting to me, because, as you said, we have the Vanyar show up in Middle Earth. They pretty quickly migrate over to live right next door to the actual, Valar. Live lives of pure holiness, free from conflict. They only pop up to do the occasional valiant battle, and then they return home. So we get the sense that their lives are fairly boring. But we know that Aman is this wonderful, almost perfected realm, but it's not perfect. It's not completely devoid of grief or even danger, and even we see this mostly in the elves themselves. The Valar seem to be perfectly happy, but the elves have problems even in this perfected sort of place. So we have Indis, who's in love with Finwë, and apparently without hope. And this is something the Valar talk about, because they're like, I don't know, why would two people be in love with the same person? What do we do? Someone's got to be sad, and I didn't think anyone was allowed to be sad in the Blessed Realm. They're having this real moral conundrum. But she's sad. Oh, but he's sad too. I don't know what to do. I can't make them both happy.
Yeah.
Finwë's wife, Miriel, gives birth to Feanor, of course, and dies. And I'm gonna skip over that a little bit, because it gets.
But she doesn't just die; she literally decides to die, which is very odd. Again, and this also plays in. This shouldn't have happened in a blessed heaven-like realm. Who decides to die in heaven, right? Yeah.
Yeah, my personal theory is that they say that so much of her soul entered into Feanaro and made him just like this pinnacle of elvishness. I just think he was a really colicky baby. And there's comes a point like this is before the invention of formula, I'm guessing. So it was probably just her. I'm thinking that at some point I've reached that point with my own children where about 3 months in I thought, literally I will just lay down and sleep forever. I'm fine. I don't need to participate in this anymore. I'm done. And then Finway's quite upset with this decision. Muriel goes and lays down forever and sleeps and sleeps and sleeps. He's thinking she's gonna get rested and wake back up, and she's like, nope, this is too great, I'm not waking up. And her spirit flees from her body, and Finway's like, what just happened? And of course he's now left with taking care of Feanor, which has got to be some kind of I can't imagine he was an easy child. So poor Finway here is like Valinor's first single dad, and he goes to the Valar and he's like, what am I going to do? I thought I was going to have a life with this woman. I thought we were going to be married and have all these kids, and this is what elves are meant to do, really. We're supposed to have families and populate this continent, and here I am with just this one kind of bratty kid, and I'm giving Feanor a hard time here. Finway adored Feanor.
Feanor deserves everything, so go on. No, but this is interesting because I feel completely different. I feel this is all Finway's fault, but by my judgment and my theory, because I think, and you hear how he says things. He complains, all the other kings have offspring. They have 3, 4, 5 children. I don't. I just have Feanor. And I mean, what you say is true, and this is how royal lines and how royal families till our day, that you need enough offspring to secure your line. But he said it in a way, he didn't say, oh, now I'm all alone, I have to raise this child alone. He said it like, all the others have more daughters, more sons, to secure the line, to keep the line going. I just have this one son, and now my wife is dead. So what do I do now? I need a new wife. And it was not, he was super in love with Indis. It wasn't, he on the spot fell in love with her and decided, okay, she'll be Feanor's stepmommy. It was very selfish and very just thinking about this royal bloodline to continue and having what the other kings have. I really do. This is how I feel about it. And this is why he was looking for a new wife. He was looking for a companion. He was looking for a mother to future children and a queen.
I see. I think Finway, I blame him for a lot of things. And I think he's blundering. I tend to, attribute his faults more to just this sort of obliviousness that maybe if he kind of woke up and looked around a little, he'd maybe change his mind on some of these things. But in one version of that law you were talking about earlier, where the Valar all get together and they say, here's Finway, and we told him he was going to be happy here forever and, have lots of children. And the succession thing is a little bit odd because you can increase your power by having more children, but of course elves don't ever expect to die.
They don't die. And then Feanor even had 7 sons. Well, he didn't knew that at that time when he wanted to remarry, but his line was really secured.
Yeah, true. It's hard to tell that. It's hard to know that Feanor. Well, maybe you could guess, but yeah, it's hard to tell just by looking at little kid Feanor that he's going to go on to just like be the ultimate progenitor. Him and Nerdanel just really, keeping busy, keeping their hands full. But in that story where he comes to the Valar and he's like, my wife has died. Do something. This isn't right. You promised me that I would be happy if I came to Valinor, and here I am. I ain't happy. This isn't good. And so the Valar discuss it, and they come back with this verdict, and they say, okay, look, we've decided that, if she won't come back, and we've talked to her, and she keeps saying that this is a permanent decision on her part, she doesn't want to come back. So if that's the case,
wave tapestry from now on.
Yeah, she's poor Muriel. Yeah, she's hanging out in the halls of Mandos with Virae. I imagine they're, they probably have a movie night or something, because she's the only one there at this point.
Yeah,
that we know of. So they go back to Finwë and they say, okay, look, it would probably be legal for you to remarry as long as your other wife agrees to stay dead, which is a weird kind of way of formulating it. But they say, we don't necessarily think that that's a good idea. And again, at least in this version, I'm thinking Morgoth's Ring. I think that's where you find kind of this expanded version of the debate of the Valar and all their sort of reasoning.
Yeah, it's Finwë Miriello, the case is called, something like that.
Right. Yeah, the statute of Finwë and Miriel. And Finwë says, well, I'm not in a hurry. My main hope was that if she heard this, Muriel would basically realize that, like, hey, this is serious and I need to decide if this is going to be forever or if I, maybe want a second chance, which I agree is not great. Maybe he needs to ask himself why she felt so strongly that the only thing left for her was to go and, like, forsake her body forever. Like, what did you do wrong as a husband and new father of Finwë? But regardless, he holds off for several years, and he's he's still kind of carrying the torch for her, and she still kind of shadows his life even after he marries Indis and goes on to have more children. We know that the shadow of Muriel was always on his heart, so he is kind of he's in mourning, and he's walking to he's going to Valmar one day, and the light is kind of coming up behind him, and he's going to visit his friend Ingwe, and Indis sees him coming, and Indis has had a crush on him for forever, and she's so, like, startled by his appearance, and apparently he looks very good. Feanor's off wandering the mountains at this point, he's being like a young adult elf, so he doesn't have Feanor with him. That's got to be a part of the appeal. Just kidding, sorry, Feanor. No bratty teenage son to detract from the awesomeness of Finwë. She bursts into song when she sees him. And Finwë looks at her and realizes in that moment, oh, this has been going on for a long time, hasn't it? You like me. And so then I think I agree. I don't think he has the same level of, falling in love with Indis that he ever had with Muriel, his first wife. But he has this moment where he's like, maybe we can build, maybe it's time to move on, basically. Maybe we can build a new life together.
No, definitely. And I do think Ingwe, whoever, was he her father? I do think he was Indis' father, because I don't think it was a sister or anything. We would have heard maybe about her that she would be born in Cuivianen or anything. I think it's a daughter. I think she's his daughter. That would be my theory. But, we don't know anything. And I think he set it up. I think it's even said that Ingwe invited Finwë to come and be with him for a while. So I completely think either Ingwe or both of the kings kind of set this up. Because Finwë was like, I'm a widower now, whatever, and have this son and want to continue my line. And Ingwe was like, oh, I have a daughter or cousin or whatever she was, like, come and stay with me and let's see. And I really do think either him or they both set it up. And she was okay with it. I mean, hello, she, as you said, she liked him from way, earlier on. Yeah, but I think it was a setup. Not setup. It was like a contract, like, what has been done for centuries, with princesses.
Yeah, there's that idea that we've talked about, how the clans of the elves are different in a lot of ways. They kind of have different lifestyles. Eventually, they even in Aman, they're developing different dialects, different even languages, ways of talking about the world. Which, obviously for Tolkien being a philologist, like, if you're developing a different language, there's a reason for that.
Yes.
So, like some sort of real difference in the way you're approaching the problem of communicating about the world. But something that we gloss over is how much the three kindreds, are working together. Finwë and Ingwe they're allies, but they're also friends. They like spending time with each other. They, get on some level. And we know that in the other direction, if you were working eastward, the Noldor and the Telari worked together to make Alqualondë.
Yes.
It was this big collaboration, and we see intermarriage. Yeah, well, that just makes it all the more poignant, of course. That again, poor Feanor.
Destroyed everything his father had built, but
everything that probably he helped build. You got to imagine that at some point he was sent to haul rocks around and hammer pearls into place or something.
Because he knew a lot what had been done in Aqualonde. He literally said, we've been literally doing this. You're very ungrateful for not shipping me to the other side of this sea. But anyway, that's another story.
that is, if we get into that, into Fëanor and the Telari, we will be here all day, and we will be very sad by the end of it. So back to the
very
Vanyar.
Fired up from a fiery spirit.
Back to pretty calm Vanyar, everything's perfect. But there's even, I guess, to circle all the way back around, we see, the Vanyar are supposed to be this very like sort of serene, is how we picture them, people. But even here, I think Morgoth is off stage at this point, or he's either stuck in Middle Earth, or he's been bound and captured. He's been bound and captured. He's not abroad. He's not causing problems in Valinor. But we still have this intrigue, Indis having a crush on Finwë, his marital status being kind of up for debate, the Valar kind of looking on and shaking their heads and being like, I don't think this is a good idea, but we can't really stop you, so go ahead. And Indis, of all people, being the one that, does something that the Valar are allowing, but they kind of disapprove of, with Finwë, of all people. Like, it kind of challenges that view of the Vanyar being this blissful people that are without their own sort of griefs and intrigues, and they do have passions and desires, and occasionally they do things that the Valar don't really agree with.
But she's very, very exceptional to that. Like, we don't know many characters of the Vanyar, but I think you said that in the beginning, or when we talked, she's kind of the exception. But then she creates one of the most important bloodlines with the king of the Noldor. So that will leave their mark on the world, and she's the mother of them.
She is, and I think we have to stop and talk about hair color now. We've put it off for a long time, but we have to embrace it.
I'm a Noldor, so obviously I'm not rooting for the Vanya. No, just kidding. Yes, hair color. So obviously, we said the fair, so they're the blondies, and I posted I'm very much into doing these family trees because it's so confusing, and I always like all these F names, like, oh my god, this family has so many F names, and so I always do these family trees, and it's because I never had, and obviously I know Galadriel is blonde, and I knew Finrod was blonde, but I didn't know Turgon, what was his haircut, it's very, very interesting how how genetics play out in Tolkien. But so they had 4 children. Spoiler. So Fëanor had lovely siblings, step brothers and sisters, and Finwë got his wish. He continued his line. He had a lot of offspring for an elf. Elves normally don't have that many children. He had 4 additional children. So the first one was, I think, Findis, a girl. We literally don't know a lot about her. She later on moved in with her mother. Kind of, we don't know if she had children, probably not. Then the second one was Fingolfin, one of my OG favorite elves of all time. Fingolfin himself had epic offspring, and his children also shaped the fate of Middle Earth and the first and second and also third century. So Fingon, Turgon, High King of the Noldor, King of the Noldor, and King of Gondolin, and Aredel, one of my favorite people. His sister, she married Eol the Dark Elf. She was the reason, partly, and her son, that Gondolin fall. Aragorn, we don't know much about him. So those were the children of Fingolfin, the first son, and Fëanor's brother, half brother. And then they had another daughter, Irime. She was blonde as well. I think Fingolfin was dark haired. Irime was blonde. She looked like a Vanya, it is said, and she took part in the flight of the Noldor, so she went back to Middle Earth. And my theory is, and I told you this, and you were like, yeah, why not? So my theory is she's Glorfindel's mother, because we know, it is said that Glorfindel is kin to Turgon. And we know the complete rest of that family line. So how can he? Obviously, he could be far off related, but I really do think my theory is the Finwë and Indi's daughter Irime went to Middle Earth, and Glorfindel also went to Middle Earth, and he was born in Aman. So he went with his mother. That makes sense. And I think she's his mother, and I think therefore he's cousin to Turgon, and he's the grandchild of Finwë and Indis. And yeah, and then they had Finarfin, so the wisest of the bunch, and the father of Galadriel and of Finrod, Angrod, and Angnor. So they had a lot of grandchildren, basically. And Fëanor had 7 sons as well. So they were literally like thousands of, Fëanor's side obviously wasn't half Vanya, but the other one. So they're running around a lot of half or quarter Vanya now in this world.
Yeah, the mingling of the different kindreds is it's very interesting because the hair color comment, I mean, it's important because not only do the Vanyar tend to be blonde, we're told that they're basically the only ones who are blonde. So any blonde elf that shows up in Tolkien theoretically has to have some Vanyarin lineage, has to, I guess, trace their way back to those original 14 if we're gonna go with the myth. And it's and Tolkien's kind of explicit about this. At one point, he mentions that it's only through Finarfin that the princes of the Noldor, inherit that blonde hair. So we have Finarfin and his children,
they're all
Finrod,
blonde. Galadriel, and all of them, they're blonde.
And then Ordreth is one generation down from that, and he presumably also might be blonde. And Finarfin, of course, his wife is Eowyn of the Telari, has silver hair. So we actually get this thing where Galadriel, the thing that makes her hair so special and glowy and people really are into her hair, is that it's kind of this weird silvery, goldy Telerin Vanyarin hybrid. Okay, I'm going to go like slightly off script here, and
we're girls. We can talk about hair.
We're talking about elf hair. I do need to bring up, go back to Fëanor and say that, so far as we know, he has no Vanyarin heritage.
No.
But we know that Miriel had silver hair, and one of his sons, Celegorm, at least in one of the early versions of the story, is explicitly called out as being not just the fair, but being the fair-headed. Now, I think later on, Tolkien decided that probably no, Celegorm just looked like an ordinary Noldo, and maybe the fair just applied to him being, I don't know, particularly good looking, or maybe he thinks he's particularly good looking. Maybe it was an ironic name, but my mental conception of Celegorm is that he kind of thinks he's God's gift to women, and maybe he's not.
Oh my god, I didn't know you had these strong feelings for him, Lexi.
Oh yeah, no, I am a Fëanorian stan. I will. The man himself could show up at my door and be like, "Get in the minivan. We're going to reclaim the Silmarils," and I would be like, "This is a terrible idea, but I am going with you."
Oh my god, I'm afraid of you now, and I thought I liked the baddies.
Yeah, no, we haven't even gotten into the actual like evil characters, but my theory. So this is my pet theory to resolve the problem of Celegorm potentially being fair-haired in a family where that should have been illegal, is that maybe Miriel was somehow akin to the Telari, or was a part of that third party, the Nelyar, before they became, quote, the Telari on the journey.
Yeah.
It's a weird one, but I like it because it makes the first kinslaying all that more just like painfully ironic.
Yeah, and you don't think it? Oh my god, definitely. But you don't think that, and it would explain, why they were actually friendly. I mean, the kings were friendly with each other, but it could be because wasn't she red-haired and red and dark? Is that? Can you? But you're not silver. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, no.
My other theory is that perhaps he was just like sort of strawberry blonde.
Yes.
Like he got the red hair, but sort of a dilute.
Yeah.
I don't know. anyway, long story
Because
short,
Medros was redhead, and I think the twins, whatever their names
the
are, I
twins
forgot.
were the Ambarusa. I think it means like redhead, like
Yes,
copper top, basically.
and Medros was red-haired, the
He was.
firstborn of the Fëanorian sons. Yeah, whatever. You know, I'm into the blondie, so it's all good. So go Finarfin. Yes, so she was the founder of that epic bloodline, and that bloodline, you know, led to people like Earendil, basically the savior of humanity. And I told you about this. Little theory I had, because the thing is the following. So here come a few bloodlines together now. And so Turgon had a wife who was also a Vanya, and Elenwe. We don't know a lot about her. Obviously, her looks must have been Vanyar. And they had a daughter, Idril. Again, I always say this, but Idril is really, she's so cool. She's one of my favorite characters. People should have listened to Idril in Gondolin. And she was so clever to make a tunnel so some of them could escape. And that daughter and the mother, they drowned when they fled to Middle Earth. And they had to take the dangerous way up in Helcaraxe. So the father had the choice, Turgon had the choice, do I save my daughter or my wife? Because they were both drowning. And he could just save one, and he saved the daughter. And so the Vanya died, his wife, and Idril, you know, she survived. She made it with him to Middle Earth, and he was the founder of Gondolin then later on. And Idril is the mother, the grandma. Oh my God, she's the mother of Earendil, yes. And they founded this, you know, this line of half elven where we know, you know, Elrond and Eros, and that choice, and Arwen later on, the choice of, do you want to be a human or do you want to choose to be an elf? So that whole choice of immortal versus mortality, also comes from this bloodline Indus created. And it's so cool to be able to trace all that back to her being a Vanya. And we said, you know, they are kind of written, or they've written themselves out of history, but in a way they did not. In my theory is Earendil being Vanya. So his mother was half Vanya, and his father is quarter Vanya. Yes, quarter Vanya. So he has a lot of Vanya. He looks Vanya. He's fair. He's blonde, and he goes to Aman, to the Undying Lands, and his family must have been there. His relatives live there basically. The other Vanya, and because the Noldor, most of them left, so Finarfin is still there. But he's from the line of Fingolfin, so his line is no longer in Aman, and he pleads with the gods, and they listen to him, and they help humanity and the elves to fight the last fight. Well, there's Dagorah, but the last fight on Earth, on Middle Earth, and they help them, and even the Vanya come and help. And my theory is they do that partly because he's of their blood, and this is why it's easier for him to convince them. Or maybe it's just that they listen to him in the beginning, because a lot of people have tried, to reach the lands and talk to the gods, but it never happened. So he was the first one who could talk to them and convince them to help them and aid them in the war against Morgoth, and to interfere again, because the Vanya never came back to Middle Earth. They just came back for this event to fight against evil, and then they went back. So am I crazy for thinking this? Could there be something to this?
I definitely think that, Indus is still in Valinor when
Yes.
her sons and one of her daughters crosses,
Yes.
and it's hard to tell exactly how much news is getting back to the elves that stay behind of what's been going on in Middle Earth, but they have they're getting they have some idea. They know it's not going well, certainly. And Indus is still there. Basically, she's watched all of her sons' children die, like, pretty horribly in most cases. You have to imagine that she's maybe kind of getting fed up with this. I kind of have a little bit more of a mercenary approach to why they let Eärendil in the first place, because he's on his way back, having tried and failed to even pass the sort of boundary to get into Valinor when Elwing
because they
comes
shut them
hurtling.
off from the world. Yes.
Yeah, they raise this sort of shadowy barrier that no one can even pass to get to land, much less to make the plea. So it takes Elwing showing up as a seagull with the Silmaril, running, of course, from my fiery ginger boy Maithros, to even get them to that. It's the presence of the Silmaril it just sounds so horrible, because everyone's so focused on these jewels, and I just like, why? They're sparkly, they have light in them, but are they worth this kind of pain? But with the Silmaril, and of course with Elwing, who is another very powerful half elven, partly Maya, she represents another bloodline. So it's the combination of all of those that gets him into Valinor. But once he's there, he's got to pitch his case. He's got to say, look, we are your people, and I can't imagine that him having this gorgeous shock of blonde hair, that can't hurt his case. The Valar are probably looking at him and thinking like, oh, but he's so cute. He's one of ours. He's one of the good guys. The sweet, the people who tend to be sweet and wise and fairly innocent, and they're not in it for power. He really wants to help his people, and we should stand behind him, maybe.
No, and as you said, his ancestor Indis is still there. She moved in with her daughter to Taniquetil, so she's close to the gods, and his uncle Finarfin is there. So all of his family is still in Aman at that time, and I think they helped him and aided him and pleaded with the Valar. And then they later even sent an army. So Ingwer sent his son, forgot the name. Ingwer himself didn't fight with the host of the Vanyar, but he sent his son, forgot the name of the son, but he sent his son as the high commander of the Vanya in the War of Wrath.
Yeah, it's what is it? Is one of them Ingil, or one of them might be Ingwaron? I think Tolkien changed his name. And he never does anything anyway except being Ingwe's son. And I mean, he must have had an interesting life, but in the story, he only shows up. We don't know anything else about him except he's the designated, heir to lead the forces to Middle-earth, which is got to be a really interesting and maybe even kind of a frustrating moment for the remaining Noldor, who have been just grinding it out for centuries, and the Sindar too, and even the not even Sindar, the Morquendi, the Avari, who are hanging around. Just they've been in the trenches for so long, and then all of a sudden here comes this glorious fleet of these powerful blonde elves wielding spears. And we haven't mentioned Gil-galad either. We don't know. We don't know so much about Gil-galad. We know that in the final version, I'm like, you can't see me, but I'm facepalming trying to remember Gil-galad's family tree. We know in the final version he's conceived as a son of Finarfin as well.
Yes.
And he's Gil-galad. He's the shining one, and he wields a spear, which we know is associated with the Vanyar.
But wait, isn't he Angrod or Egnor's son? Oh God, yeah.
I forgot. I mean, he's a descendant. Shoot, he might be Orodreth's. We know that he originally starts in the Silmarillion. Chris Tolkien says he's Fingon's son.
Yes,
or descendant of Fingon. And
that was a mistake, I think.
Yes. Yeah, he backpedals on that, and he says he's somehow descended from Finarfin. We don't know if he's like his grandson, great-grandson, if he's Orodreth's, if he's Angrod's. He can't be Agnor's, because Agnor's in love with Andreth.
Yes, and he never married and went, but no, you're right, yes.
Yes, and then, so it's a mess. But it's, that just occurred to me that, the Vanyar show up in all their glory, backed by the Valar and the Maiar. They trounce Morgoth, and then they sail back home, and the Noldor and the Sindar are kind of like, well, I mean, what, we're just supposed to follow you back? Or, are we, some of us are exiled, things have changed for us, man. We just can't go back and pick up our lives where they left off. And Gil-galad Iranian is one of those of the Vanyarin line. In my head, he was always blonde, but he could, I guess it's possible he could not be. But being descended from that golden house. and
Yeah,
wielding the
but
spear.
I think he's from Fingolfin's line, and Fingolfin, and I do think they all had. So he's, I think, Fingon's son, so Fingolfin's grandson, and that would make him dark-haired. I mean, we don't know about the mother, but yeah.
Yeah, we don't ever really. There's
Really, because
so
I think maybe because I'm influenced from the movies, but I thought he's dark-haired. I think all the ones for me, he's an Noldor. I don't know, and this is why, because the Telari elves, then later after the first kinslaying, that went and lived near Eregion and settled there, they didn't want to be ruled by him because they didn't want to be ruled by a Noldor. I think they would have been okay if he identified more as Vanya. They would be okay with that, but he was a Noldorian prince, and so they were like, we don't want to be ruled by you, but it's safe here, so we stay here. Yeah, so
this is kind of similar to what Galadriel's dealing with.
yes.
She's like, well,
We
I
don't
mean,
want a
technically I'm a
Noldorian
Noldor.
ruler. Okay, now we have a Noldorian. She doesn't call herself queen, but
Yes, well, yeah, it's this awkward situation where she's very carefully, I think, not saying that she's the queen. She's, I'm noble. I'm a lady. I'll be your
yeah,
lady,
yes.
ruling you in, almost all particular.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to call myself your queen, but I am. Yes. So the Vanya and Ingwe himself, we haven't talked about the High King. I think not much to say, but what I like is he must have been a good king. I mean, the thing is, nothing really happens but then Fëanor uprising and everything. And why did that happen? Because I mean, yes, Finn was killed, but and then Fëanor completely freaked and had his ways. But you never hear any uprising against Ingwer, so he was a good king because Tolkien would have told us otherwise if he wouldn't have been a good king. And I don't think Finwë was a very very good king and father. I mean, he's not father of the century. He's, so I. I think it's important that yes, he was the high king of all elves, but for his people, I think he was a good king and a good ruler. And it might be easier in Aman, than in Middle Earth where there are thousands of wars and things going on. But I think that's important to know. Yeah, that he actually was a de facto good ruler, because we have very bad examples of rulers. So he is counted amongst those. And as far as we know, he lives on. So right from the beginning, he had been ruling all elves and be the high king of all elves and will probably be till eternity. Yeah, which is a nice thought in all these wars and all that there are good kings as well.
Yeah, we have to, remember that even before Finwë's death and Morgoth destroying the trees, things have not been great in Valinor for the Noldor, at least, for a very long time. There's, everyone's forging weapons and
Yes,
threatening their half siblings in public
with
forums
swords.
and with swords to throats, and kind of this like arms race almost going on, and the Valar are over here going like, guys, this is a realm of peace. And then I'm gonna anger some people here, but the Telari with their bows defending their ships, to me it seems like there's a lot of anger and distrust on both sides. Maybe Olwe and Fëanor are kind of having this more reasoned debate over give us your ships, and I don't think that's a good idea. Well, you owe us. Well, yeah, we do, but we're still not going to do this because this is bad juju, Fëanor. You're not making good choices. You need to sit down and have a cold drink. And meanwhile, it's like the common Noldor on the ground, the Telari on the ground, they come to blows basically. There's tension there. So and Morgoth's been roaming around spreading dissent, and that, like you said, the very fact that we never hear of that happening among the Vanyar. They even they withdraw from Morgoth even though he's supposed to be, quote, reformed. They never listen to him. They don't have any temptation to rebel against the Valar because they see from the get-go that it's such a terrible idea. I think that really speaks to Ingwe's power in creating, I guess, that kind of that kind of culture, if you will, or that kind of lifestyle for his people, that they can see through the lies and recommit themselves to peace, even as the wise Noldor and the Telari are, they're still good people, they're still elves, they still kind of abide by the same moral tenets, but they are kind of decaying and believing the lies and being led astray.
And who mirrors that in her story, Galadriel, who's of the Vanya. Like, she literally mirrors it. She's never swayed. She, right from the get-go, sees something is off with Sauron when they are in Eregion. She doesn't trust him. She doesn't know fully who he is, but she doesn't trust him. This is part of the reason why she also left. And, the Noldor, they don't really realize it. They go with it in the beginning. And Galadriel, being of the Vanya, she doesn't, which kind of cool. And same with Idril. She also doesn't trust Meglin, and she knows something is off. This is why she has her secret plan and tunnel going on. So you see in these two women, being of Vanya descent and blood, it's a bit played out in their story.
Yeah, it ties back to that idea of the Vanyar having sort of the most pure elvishness and the highest degree of spiritual authority, which would correlate with the highest degree of insight. We get the sense that Vanyar can really clearly get to
the hearts.
Get to the root of the matter. So we see, like you said, Idril having her sort of foresight moments. Even Finrod with his love for men. He, the Eldar are not sure what to make of men. A lot of them don't want them hanging around. They're like, I don't know, but I don't like it. I don't trust it. Maybe we can use them as cannon fodder. And Finrod is the one who not only, sees the value in them and as people instead of just as like potential allies, but he also, I think, has this moment where he's deciding to help Beren, knowing that it's probably going to lead to
his doom,
his death. Yeah, he knows that this is doom, and he goes forward with it anyway because he can tell that this is going to be something very important to save everybody, to save not just elves but men, unite our
the
lines.
bigger picture. Yes. Yeah. But I find, and this is totally off topic, but I know you like Haleth, and we've been talking about her. Is it Curufin or Caranthir? I never know who of the two, but Fëanor's offspring did one good thing, because they offered, after they've been fighting, they offered them land, and Haleth then didn't take it, but he was also like, oh wow, these men are really brave, the men of Brethil? No,
I think it's
no, it's not Brethil. What are Haleth's people, and they fought, and then he offered them, one of the two offered them land and live with him. Was it in Himring? Oh, I'm really off
I
topic.
think it was was Caranthir
Targaryen
at that point?
Targaryen,
that's where he originates, for sure.
Yes.
And they're, the Haleth and her folk, and of course Haleth is just now becoming the queen. They weren't her folk originally. She had a father and an elder brother, or was it a twin brother? Maybe an elder twin brother. Anyway, Haleth finds herself in this position where her father dies and her brother dies, and she's holding the people together. They've been basically told that Doriath is off limits to them. Thingol wants nothing to do with them. He has his reasons. And Caranthir has kind of written men off, and it is Caranthir who shows up, and he shows up, and because Curufin wouldn't. He wouldn't. He's too arrogant, and he was in the area. But Caranthir, I think, shows up and has this moment as well of saying, wow, I did not expect that you people would be doing this well. Maybe you should come and like guard my flank, basically, settle in my land, and you can be an additional sort of support to my people. And I think Haleth is pretty smart to look at him and be like, yeah, but how invested are you in us, really? This seems like the sense that I get from Caranthir is that he's very like mercenary. He's very strategic. He doesn't do things without a reason. Versus Finrod, who just like gushes over the Edain when he meets them.
He loves them. He teaches them. He teaches them. Obviously, it's a different concept, and you're completely right. But still, look at Thingol. He doesn't want to have anything to do with humans. And then at least he acknowledges. they are, good fighters. They are strong. And for them, for the Sons of Feanor, being that and inviting them is still some, like something. But this is completely off topic. It's not about the, it just reminded me when we were talking about that. That's for another stream, Lexi. But yeah. So Vanya, do we have any more? I think we've really reached the end of the people of the Vanya and full-blooded or half-blooded Vanya. Do we have any more you have on your?
No, I mean, we've gone through Ingwe and his son. We know Indis, and then all of her many
Yes.
descendants have very important roles to play. Arendelle kind of unites those lines.
Yeah.
And then the only one I can think of that's mentioned is there's this guy Elamire, and he's supposed to write a song about the death of the trees, and that is literally he pops up, he says, and then Elamire wrote a song about him. He was a Vanya, and then like that's the end. Is he gets one sentence in the Silmarillion, but I mean it does. I guess the only thing we can say about him is that he speaks to the fact that it is the Vanyar who are the poets.
Yes.
You have that sort of like ecstatic union and vision to write these. What I can only imagine are just these long odes that any mortal listener would find just painfully dense to
Yeah,
work
and I
through.
imagine them, sitting in the halls of Mandos and reciting those thingies, and the Vala are very happy about this, and I would be like, can I go now? I want to go to war. Anyway, yes, so your overall verdict, having talked about this for over an hour now, they're not your favorite elven clan, I reckon. I think you're Noldor like me, are you? Or what are you at heart, Lexi?
Yeah, I'm like my sympathies lie with high Noldoran trash, just like complete ride or die. I know that they make such terrible decisions. They're just awful people, some of them, but I just they're so fascinating.
Yes.
And I do have a strong like Sylvan sympathetic streak as well. I actually I feel pretty bad for some of the aspects of what I imagine was Ael's upbringing. He's I know weird, right? I'm not saying that I like endorse him, but I can kind of see why he has had kind of a life that would make him be maybe not the best decision maker. Not that it excuses any of his I don't support like trying to kill your son because your brother-in-law was rude to you one time. I don't think that that's good life choices. I think you should maybe let your wife visit her friends
Or
and
spellbound your future wife, although you hate Noldor, and then marry a Noldorian princess by
yeah.
putting a spell on her.
Yeah, this is a healthy start to a relationship, Ael. This is great. No, absolutely not. I'm just saying that I can kind of feel for the Avari. I think that Ael's
Yes,
really the
no, I
only
can.
chance we get. Anyway, I'm getting way too far abroad. I could talk about elves all day.
Yeah, we'll
I
come to
think
him on your stream. We do the Noldor on yours, so we can talk Ale all day long.
yes, we'll get into
Justice hashtag justice for Meglin.
hashtag justice for Mygleen. I think we write the Vanyar off at our peril. They have shown repeatedly, mostly again through their descendants and the sort of mingling of the bloodlines, which maybe that's it. Maybe it takes that shot of Noldoran blood or Teleran blood to invigorate the noble sentiments that maybe they inherit from the Vanyar. But I think I would trust the Vanyar most of all the clans of elves to watch my kids. Whereas I have this spectrum. It's the watch my kids, have a beer with. I would be off in the bars, drinking with Caranthir, and then I would leave my kids with Ingwe. I'd be like, you're safe here. He's going to make the best choices and look out for you and probably set up a craft station. I don't know.
Yeah.
You'll all be writing limericks and they're very, there's a value to that sort of purity and kindness, I guess.
Good. Yeah. Well, the thing is, for me, when I digged a bit deeper in the beginning, I was what I remembered of the Vanya from the Submariner and the additional material was, oh my god, blissfully boring, almost angels. But then I digged a bit deeper, and what I think is important. Look, so if this wouldn't be a story about war, good versus evil. I think we would know more about them, but it's just like in history, we know less about heaven than we know about hell. We know less about good deeds than we know about bad deeds. And so this is not their story. They don't have a big part in this story. And it's not because they're not important. It's just not, they don't have these traits and they don't have these stories to tell. Doesn't make them less important. And I really like what we said. They like poetry. They moved in basically with the demigods and lived a blissfully boring life. But when it really counted, they were there, and I like that. So they didn't fully write themselves out of history, and they were still a bit connected. And in a way, I find it sad. They were born in Quivien, and there was a reason they were born on Earth, and they never ever experienced, almost none of them, well, the few offsprings we talked about, but none of them experienced life on Earth. And I do find that a bit sad, but still, I find them interesting. They're not my favorite ones, but I think it was important for me when I did the research for the video I posted a few months ago. I found it cool that there's more to them than I thought originally. And yeah, it's, I think, what Tolkien felt as well.
Yeah, when Tolkien tells you that a certain group or person, is wise and is doing the right thing, and this is kind of the paragon that we should more be aspiring to, even though I'm going to tell you about all these like dreadful people making horrible choices, because that makes an interesting story. But just he went to the trouble of making almost an entire clan that was as good of an example of what it meant to be a good elf as
Yes.
possible. And I think what we learn from that is that they're not cowardly. They are committed to beauty. They're ready to take up arms if they are fully convinced that it's the right thing to do and there's no other way. But I mean, after that, they're happy to return back to what they probably see as their real lives and their real purpose, which is to work hard to learn as much as they can, create as much as they can, and live in harmony with the dictates of the world and of nature as they perceive it.
Yeah, I agree. Good. So, Lexi, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really, really enjoyed this, and I hope you'll be back. I hope we can continue the series, and we'll talk about that, and then let people know. Yes. So, thank you, my lovelies, for staying on. This was a very long one, but I think we both enjoyed it. I didn't even look at the time, just seeing this now. So thank you, everybody who made it till here. Again, Lexi's details down below. Please subscribe. And let us know what you would be interested in hearing next. And when you hear this video should be already on my channel, is the Noldor video about the Noldor elves. And Lexi, what is one of the recent videos you want to advertise here? You did, because I saw you have been doing some videos in the past days and weeks.
Yeah, I've been trying to build up that catalog. I think one of the ones that has apparently been a little bit more popular is I'm trying to do a series where I really get a handle on what magic is in Middle-earth and how it functions, which is, I mean, if it shows up in so many different ways, and obviously there's some sort of logic behind it, but it's never really made explicit. So that's been, I've got a couple of videos up on that right now that have gotten some really nice conversations in the comments as well. That's one of my favorite things, is I'll upload one of these videos and then I'll get like amazing just tidbits and facts and essays in the comments where it's like I learn more after the video is posted than I do doing the research.
I feel the same. There's so many clever people out there that know way more than we do. But yeah, it's nice to interact and share opinions. So yes, cool. Awesome. So again, thank you, my lovelies, and till the next one. Bye bye.